Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. James Harrington watched his family from his glass-enclosed office on the top floor of his sprawling penthouse. The view of the illuminated city was like a carpet of diamonds spread beneath his feet. But tonight, despite the lights and the luxury, a shadow crossed his mind. He knew he had it all: money, power, respect, but did he have the true love of his wife Elizabeth and his daughter Sophia? Elizabeth, elegant and always smiling, and Sophia, lively and curious at only 17, seemed to love him deeply. But James feared that their affection was only linked to his wealth. Appearances could be deceiving. The billionaire businessman, known for his insight and strategic sense, decided to conduct an extreme experiment. That night, James made a bold, almost cruel choice: he would fake the loss of his entire fortune. He would destroy his bank accounts, quietly sell off his possessions, and live among ordinary people, without luxury or privilege. All this to test the souls of those he loved. Not to trap them out of malice, but to see if their love would survive the trials. He knew this plan carried risks. Elizabeth might feel betrayed, Sophia might hate him for what she perceived as abandonment. But James was prepared to observe everything, to measure everything. Every gesture, every reaction, every choice of those close to him would be a test of authenticity or superficiality. He stood up, walked to the window, and gazed out at the night. Skyscrapers glittered, cars whizzed by, people laughed in restaurants. For James, the question was simple: does money create love, or can true love exist even when everything else disappears? The next day, James would declare bankruptcy. He would reduce his fortune to almost nothing, move his family into a small, modest apartment, and begin his charade. But in his heart, he knew this test would change everything: family relationships, priorities, and perhaps even the essence of love itself. James Harrington, a billionaire among billionaires, was about to discover what no amount of wealth could ever reveal: the truth about those he loved, and perhaps himself. The next morning, Elizabeth Harrington was already in the kitchen, making coffee as she did every day. The sun filtered through the gold curtains, illuminating the silent manor. James entered, looking grave, his hands clenched around a thick envelope. "Elizabeth, we need to talk," he said, his voice tense but controlled. She looked up, a smile spreading across her face. "What is it, darling? You look serious." James sat down across from her, took a deep breath, and placed the envelope on the table. "It's over. Everything is gone. The company has gone bankrupt. My accounts are empty. Everything we have, gone." Elizabeth froze, the coffee nearly falling out of her cup. What? "James, you're joking. This can't be happening." Her voice trembled, a mixture of fear and disbelief. James shook his head slowly. "I'm serious. We need to prepare ourselves to live differently." Sophia then walked into the kitchen, her hair a mess, a notebook in her hand. "Dad? What's going on?" "Sophia," James hesitated, searching for the words. We're out of money. We'll have to change our lives." Sophia stared at him, mouth agape. Are you kidding?" "Mom, he's joking, isn't he?" Elizabeth knelt beside her, trying to hide her own panic. "No, darling. He's serious, but we'll get through this, I promise." The next few days were a shock. The Harringtons moved from their lavish mansion to a small apartment in the city center. The rooms were modest, the walls cold and white. There was no butler, no limousine, no chefs to prepare meals. Just them, together, facing a new and uncomfortable reality. Sophia looked at the tiny kitchen table, the plain plates, and the bills piled high on the counter. Is this real?" she whispered. "Yes, and we must learn to live like this," James replied. But inside, he watched every reaction, every gesture of those close to him. Fear, frustration, but also resilience, all would be crucial to his test. Elizabeth, despite her fears, began to plan. We have to manage the groceries, pay the bills, maybe get a job. We'll get through this. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes shone with a new determination. Sophia hugged her mother. I don't want us to be poor, but I want to stay with you. James felt a lump in his throat. This small, innocent gesture, this familiar, sincere connection, partially confirmed what he'd been looking for: love could exist even without luxury. But he knew the real test was only just beginning. That evening, as the three of them sat down to a simple dinner, James watched his two wives. The mansion and the yachts now seemed like something out of this world, and the real challenge was beginning: to survive, to love, and to remain honest, despite the loss of everything they had ever known. The alarm clock rang in the tiny apartment, but nothing in the room recalled the luxury of Harrington Manor. The walls were bare, the wooden floor creaked with every step, and the morning light filtered through the two short curtains. Elizabeth sighed as she stood, knowing this life was going to be a rude shock. Sophia, wake up, we have to make breakfast, she said in a firm but gentle tone. Sophia groaned, rubbed her eyes, and shuffled to her feet. Mom, is this really it now? No chef, no butler, just us? Elizabeth placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Yes, darling. But we'll learn to manage. We have no choice. James, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee he had made himself, which had seemed almost humiliating to him, watched. Every gesture of his wife and daughter was an indicator, a piece of data in his silent test. The first challenge came in the morning. Elizabeth went out to do her shopping at a small neighborhood supermarket. She was used to private services, to groceries prepared by assistants. Here, she had to queue up, compare prices, and count every cent. Sophia, curious, followed closely. Mom, can't we just take this product? It's more expensive. Elizabeth frowned. No, Sophia. Every cent counts. We need to learn to manage money wisely. Back at the apartment, they discovered a task the mansion had always spared them: cooking for themselves. The recipes were simple, but Elizabeth felt clumsy. The pasta was boiling over in the pot, the sauce was burning slightly, and Sophia was trying to help. Mom, I think we should add a little salt, Sophia said shyly. Elizabeth smiled despite the stress. Yes, you're right. Let's learn together. James watched them from the couch, a hint of emotion in his eyes. Every small victory, every genuine smile, every moment of cooperation reminded him that love and solidarity could exist without money. But the difficulties didn't end there. The bills were piling up quickly. Electricity, water, rent, everything was a source of anxiety. Elizabeth had to learn to prioritize, say no to whims, and make difficult choices. Sophia, for her part, began to understand what living with less really meant. No designer clothes, no fancy outings, just reality. But still, she found herself appreciating certain aspects. She was spending more time with her mother, laughing over small things, and discovering the value of daily work. That evening, after a simple but self-prepared dinner, Elizabeth and Sophia sat side by side. I never thought this could be interesting, Sophia murmured. Elizabeth smiled, placing a hand on her daughter's. It's hard, but we're learning. And we're together. That's what matters most. James, watching them silently, knew at that moment that the test was beginning to reveal unexpected truths. Fear and discomfort could reveal strength, and luxury was no measure of love. But he also knew that this was only the beginning, and that real challenges would soon arise. A few weeks had passed since the Harringtons had left the manor. Life in the modest surroundings was beginning to feel normal, but each day brought its own challenges. Elizabeth had found a small job at a local bookstore, while Sophia helped out part-time at a local cafe. James, meanwhile, watched every move, every decision, ready to note the reactions of his wife and daughter. One afternoon, as Elizabeth was leaving the bookstore, an elegant woman approached her. Mrs. Harrington? My name is Vanessa, and I work for a firm that helps people invest, improve their financial situation quickly. I heard about your recent situation. Perhaps we could help you. Elizabeth frowned. How do you know who I am? Vanessa smiled, too perfect, too calculated. Oh, don't worry about that. We can fix things, quickly. With a few small steps, you could get your old lifestyle back. Elizabeth felt an alarm go off in her mind. Something in the woman's voice wasn't sincere. I don't know. She stammered, uncertain. Sophia, who had joined her mother, watched the scene and whispered, "Mom, this seems too good to be true." Elizabeth took a deep breath and shook her head. No, Sophia. We've learned something in these weeks, the easy life isn't always the right one. We have to get by with honesty, not shortcuts. Vanessa raised an eyebrow, a fake smile playing on her lips. As you wish, but know that some opportunities only present themselves once. She walked away, leaving a faint scent of threat and temptation behind her. That evening, James watched them silently from the sofa. The test was there. Elizabeth and Sophia had had the opportunity to cheat, to give in to the easy option, and they had resisted. But he knew the temptation would return, in different forms, even more dangerous. A few days later, Sophia received an invitation to a charity event for young adults, a luxurious event with celebrities and wealthy patrons. The kind of place where the Harringtons' lives would have seemed normal once upon a time. The invitation came from a charming young man, who seemed intent on helping her rise. Sophia showed the invitation to her mother. "Mom, this could be a good opportunity, right?" Elizabeth shook her head. "Look at things clearly. There's always a price to pay. True value doesn't come from money or luxury. If something seems too easy, be wary." Sophia sighed, but understood. She folded the invitation and put it away. This wasn't just a test for James, it was a test for themselves. Could they remain honest and true to their values even when luxury and ease presented themselves in seductive forms? James, silent but attentive, felt a mixture of pride and fear. His loved ones were strong, but the test was only just beginning. The modest life confronted them with moral choices, and the temptations were only just beginning. A week had passed since Elizabeth and Sophia had moved into their new apartment. The modest routines had become familiar, but James knew he needed to push the test a little further. He had to see if his wife and daughter could remain true to their values even in the face of manipulation. One afternoon, while Elizabeth was hanging the laundry on the balcony, a neighbor, a man in his 40s named Carl, knocked on their door. He introduced himself with a warm smile. "Hello, my name is Carl. I live next door and I heard about your situation. It's difficult living like this. Perhaps I can help you." Elizabeth eyed him suspiciously. "Thank you, but we'll manage. We've learned to handle our problems ourselves." Carl shrugged dramatically. Sure, but sometimes you can get help. After all, you have a past, don't you? You've achieved success and wealth. I could put you back on your feet, but there's a price to pay." Sophia, who was watching the scene from the hallway, frowned. "Mom, what does he mean by price tag?" Elizabeth felt her heart clench. "Stay close to me, Sophia. Don't trust anyone who promises you something so easy." Carl stepped forward slightly, his smile turning almost ominous. "Let's just say, some information about your family might be useful to me, in exchange for a little financial support. Nothing serious, just a few secrets." Elizabeth felt a mixture of anger and fear rise within her. "We will never do that. Never. No matter what the situation, we will not betray our family." Sophia, inspired by her mother's courage, added, "Yes, sir. We don't need your money or your promises. We'll make it on our own." Carl raised an eyebrow, visibly surprised by their firmness. "You are brave, I must admit. Very good. But remember, life tests each of us, sometimes cruelly." He walked away, leaving behind an eerie atmosphere, a mixture of tension and relief. This confrontation left Elizabeth and Sophia silent for a moment. They held hands, realizing that this test was about much more than losing money. It was about choosing between convenience and integrity, between betrayal and loyalty. From the shadows, James watched them, a slight smile on his lips. What he had just seen confirmed part of his plan. They were capable of making the right choices when temptations presented themselves, even if it meant giving up all material advantages. But he also knew that life would present them with even more complex challenges. The true test of character was not measured in comfort or fear, but in the ability to maintain integrity, even when everything seemed to be working against them. And James had never been more aware that every decision, every gesture, every word would now be a piece in the puzzle of his true experience. Days after the incident with Carl, life in their modest apartment continued to test Elizabeth and Sophia. Bills were piling up, errands required time and patience, and stress seemed to weigh on every decision. Yet, an unexpected ray of light entered their daily lives. As Elizabeth returned from the bookstore, a small package was left on their doorstep. A handwritten note accompanied it. To help you through this difficult time. With all my support, Margaret. Intrigued, Elizabeth opened the package. Inside were basic necessities: pasta, rice, milk, some canned goods, and even some fresh produce. Sophia arrived at that moment, her eyes wide. "Mom, who left this?" she asked, amazed. Elizabeth shrugged. "I don't know, but someone wants us well. Maybe a neighbor." The next day, an elderly woman, Margaret, knocked on their door. She was small, frail, with a warm smile and eyes that sparkled with kindness. "Hello, I just wanted to make sure you received my package. I know life can be hard, and sometimes a small gesture can make a big difference." Elizabeth felt a deep emotion pass through her. "Thank you, that's very generous of you." Margaret nodded. "I know what it's like to struggle. I've been through tough times myself. Sometimes all it takes is a little support to keep you going." Sophia, touched, added, "It's incredible, we didn't ask for anything and yet you." She stopped, moved. Elizabeth took her daughter in her arms. "Sophia, you see, kindness exists, even without money. Even in the most difficult times, there are people willing to help, simply because it's human." James, discreetly observing the scene from the balcony, felt an emotion he hadn't anticipated, a deep admiration for his family's resilience and capacity for gratitude. This small gesture, simple but sincere, showed Elizabeth and Sophia that true wealth was not in money, but in human relationships, solidarity, and kindness. This encounter with Margaret had an unexpected effect. Elizabeth began to see their situation in a different light, not just as a trial, but as a life lesson. Sophia, for her part, began to understand that even in deprivation, there were moments of beauty and generosity that could not be bought. For James, this stage of his testing revealed something crucial: it wasn't enough to confront his family with difficulty. He also had to observe how they responded to genuine kindness and support. And in these simple moments, he was already seeing signs of true love and sincere gratitude. That evening, over a modest but warm dinner, Elizabeth and Sophia shared their feelings and hopes, more united than ever. James, invisible but attentive, understood that despite the feigned poverty, his family remained intact in its capacity to love, to support each other, and to maintain integrity. A few weeks after moving into their modest life, Sophia was beginning to adjust to her new routine. School, working at the cafe, and spending time with her mother had made her more mature and responsible. But James knew the real test would come from outside, testing his daughter's ability to discern sincerity in human relationships. One afternoon, while serving customers at the cafe, Sophia was approached by a well-dressed, charming, and smiling young man named Ethan. He seemed familiar with the place and knew how to strike up a conversation. "Hi, I'm Ethan. I noticed you're still here. You work hard. I wanted to tell you that I admire you." Sophia blushed slightly. "Thank you, that's sweet." Ethan took a seat and began chatting with her every day. He asked questions about her life, her dreams, and seemed genuinely interested. But James, hiding in a corner of the cafe to observe, knew that this interest could also be a temptation. A few days later, Ethan offered her something tempting, a ticket to a fancy event where she could meet celebrities and influencers. "You deserve to see the world like other people. I can take you, if you want." Sophia hesitated. Her heart was beating fast. Part of her wanted to give in, to recapture the glamour she'd known, to feel the attention and luxury, even for an evening. But an inner voice, reinforced by the lessons of the past few weeks, held her back. She remembered her mother's advice and the sincerity they had learned to appreciate with Margaret. Relationships are not measured by what the other can offer materially, but by honesty and respect. "Thank you, Ethan, but I can't accept," she said firmly but politely. "I have to stay true to myself and my family." Ethan seemed surprised, but respected her decision. "Fine. I understand. You're different, Sophia. I admire that." This seemingly simple interaction reinforced James's test. He realized that his daughter had developed a true maturity, capable of discerning the hidden intentions behind seductive gestures. She did not succumb to ease or the dazzle of the outside world. That evening, Sophia told Elizabeth the story. "Mom, he wanted to take me to a luxurious event, but I refused." Elizabeth smiled, moved and proud. "I'm so proud of you, my darling. You've learned to recognize the value of sincerity and to stay true to your principles." James, watching this scene from the kitchen doorway, felt a mixture of pride and relief. His tests revealed truths no bank account could measure: integrity, maturity, and genuine family love. But he also knew the tension would continue to grow. The real challenges, the ones that would test their patience and loyalty, were yet to come. And he needed to observe them closely to understand the true depth of their characters. After several months of living modestly, Elizabeth and Sophia had found a rhythm, but fatigue, stress, and sacrifice were beginning to take their toll. Even the strongest family bonds can be tested when pressure becomes constant. One evening, after a long day at the bookstore and the cafe, Elizabeth returned home, her face drawn with fatigue. Sophia had tried to cook dinner, but the pot was burning and the sauce was boiling over. "Sophia, be careful. You'll ruin everything," Elizabeth exclaimed, more harshly than she intended. Sophia stiffened, her eyes shining with frustration. "Mom, I'm doing my best. You can't do everything yourself." Tensions rose quickly, the two women nearly shouting at each other for the first time since their simulated fall. Hurtful words flew, revealing pent-up stress and pent-up emotions. James, who had remained silent in a corner of the room, watched intently. This moment was crucial. In adversity, how would his family react? Would they tear themselves apart completely, or would they manage to come together after the storm? After a few minutes of tense silence, Elizabeth took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I shouldn't yell. I'm just tired." Sophia, also moved, replied, "Me too, Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be disrespectful." The two women moved closer and embraced. In that simple gesture, James saw something profound. Despite the stress and hardship, family love and support remained. Conflicts were natural, but the ability to reconcile revealed their strength. Over the next few days, Elizabeth and Sophia worked together to improve their daily routines, cooking, paying bills, and running errands. They began to support each other, share responsibilities, and find moments of connection even in the face of difficulty. James realized that this stage of his test was perhaps the most revealing. True strength lies not in the absence of problems, but in how a family faces challenges together. One night, as he watched them sleep from the living room, James muttered to himself, "It is in these moments of tension and reconciliation that true love reveals itself, and I begin to understand what I have been looking for all along." But he knew the trials would only intensify. Temptations and challenges would continue to arise, and every decision, every gesture, would be a precious clue to his family's sincerity and courage. As the months passed, the Harrington family slowly adjusted to life in the simple world. Routines became easier, conflicts less frequent, and a newfound complicity developed between Elizabeth and Sophia. Yet James knew the test was not over. Now he needed to introduce an element of mystery to observe their reaction to uncertainty and partial truth. One evening, as the family dined on a simple but carefully prepared meal, James spoke up. "Elizabeth. Sophia, there's something you need to know." Elizabeth looked up, worried. "What now, James?" James sighed, subtly playing with a small coin he twirled between his fingers. "We've been through a lot, and you've been amazing. But I can't tell you the whole truth right now. There are things you have to discover for yourselves." Sophia frowned. "What do you mean?" "I can't reveal everything, but know that not everything we experienced was exactly as you think. There are clues here and there. It's up to you to notice them, and up to you to decide what they mean." Elizabeth and Sophia exchanged a puzzled look. Part of them wanted to know the truth immediately, but the other part felt this mystery was a lesson in itself. In the days that followed, James subtly left clues: a receipt forgotten in a pocket, a scribbled note with a reference to his former life, traces of past luxuries in the attic they had never explored. Each clue was designed to test their perspicacity and patience. Sophia, curious and thoughtful, began asking questions and analyzing details. "Mom, look at this receipt, it's from a luxury store." "How is that possible?" Elizabeth, intrigued but cautious, replied, "I don't know, Sophia, maybe some things are different than we thought. But let's remember, what matters is what we do now, not what we had before." James watched silently, pleased to see their balance. They were intrigued but remained centered in their values. They sought the truth, but did not give in to obsession with the past or luxury. This little game of partial revelations put Elizabeth and Sophia in a delicate position. They knew they didn't hold all the cards, but they had to continue living and making decisions based on integrity and trust. This step allowed James to understand something important: sincerity and maturity were manifested not only in financial hardships, but also in the ability to manage uncertainty and maintain trust in family relationships. And as night fell on the modest apartment, James understood that true wealth lay not in money or power, but in loyalty, love, and the ability to navigate mystery and adversity with courage and wisdom. One sunny afternoon, Elizabeth and Sophia decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to enjoy a rare moment of peace and quiet. Their modest lives had taught them to appreciate the little things that wealth and luxury had once rendered invisible. But on this day, James had planned a more direct test, a test that would reveal his family's courage and loyalty in the face of real danger. As they were walking through a crowded park, an accident occurred. An out-of-control cyclist sped straight toward a young child playing on the path. Elizabeth instinctively shouted, "Watch out," and rushed to protect the boy, while Sophia immediately followed, trying to help. The chaos lasted for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. Elizabeth managed to catch the child just in time, but lost her balance and fell heavily to the ground. Sophia, panicked, rushed to her, tears in her eyes. James, who had been discreetly watching the scene from a safe distance, felt his heart pound. This wasn't just a test of wealth or temptation, it was a test of courage, instinct, and true love. Once on their feet, Elizabeth wiped the blood from her knee and took a deep breath. "It's okay, darling, he's okay." Sophia hugged her. "Mom, you could have hurt yourself." Elizabeth smiled weakly. "No matter the danger, protecting others is more important than anything." The boy, still trembling, looked at the two women in admiration. Passers-by applauded, and some offered help. But for James, the real spectacle wasn't in the action itself, but in his family's reactions. The fear, solidarity, and courage of his loved ones had just been manifested in a pure and sincere way. Back at the apartment, Elizabeth and Sophia rested, still shaken by the incident. James finally sat down with them and said calmly, "You showed courage, love, and composure. It wasn't easy, and yet you acted without hesitation." Elizabeth, wiping the sweat from her brow, murmured, I guess all this hardship has served a purpose. Even without money, we've discovered what really matters." Sophia, her voice trembling but full of pride, added, "Yes, we have learned to support each other, to stay honest and to be courageous." No matter the difficulties, we have each other. James watched them, intense emotion in his eyes. This final test had confirmed what he feared and hoped for the most: his family loved sincerely, courageously, and loyally. Material trials and external temptations had never broken their integrity or their love. For James, this revelation was earth-shattering. Wealth, yachts, and mansions had never been the true measure of human worth. That day, he understood that courage, love, and loyalty were the only true riches. And as night fell over their small apartment, a sense of pride and peace settled in James's heart. His tests had reached their peak, revealing the true depth of his family, and setting the stage for the final revelation. Evening had fallen on the modest apartment, and the Harrington family gathered around a simple dinner. Months of hardship, sacrifice, and lessons had forged a bond stronger than ever between Elizabeth, Sophia, and James. But one question hung in the air: would James finally reveal the truth about his fortune and the true purpose of this experiment? James put down his fork, took a deep breath, and said calmly, "Elizabeth. Sophia, it's time you knew the truth. Everything you've been through wasn't exactly as you thought it would be." Elizabeth looked at him incredulously. "What do you mean, James?" James paused, observing the reactions of his loved ones. "I never really lost my fortune. All of this, the bankruptcy, the modest life, the hardships, it was a test. I wanted to know if you loved me for who I am and not for what I have." Sophia, her eyes wide, whispered, You've been cheating on us, all this time." Elizabeth, with a mixture of anger and relief on her face, added, "You could have trusted us. You put our lives in danger for a test." James looked down, feeling the heaviness of his actions. "I know, and I understand your anger. But I had to be certain. I needed to see if love, loyalty, and courage could survive without the security of money. And you've proven something incredible." Sophia, still shocked but reflecting on everything she had learned, whispered, "So, everything we went through, the challenges, the temptations, was all to prove to you that we really love you?" James nodded, a slight smile appearing despite the tension. "Exactly. And you succeeded. You were honest, brave, and loyal, even when everything seemed against you. You showed the true wealth that no one can buy." Elizabeth took a deep breath, letting go of some of her anger. I guess I understand now, but it wasn't easy." Sophia, taking her mother's hand, added, "Yes, Dad, we love you for you, not for your money. And now, I think we're stronger than ever." James looked at them, moved, finally understanding that his test, though severe and risky, had achieved its goal. The truth he had been seeking all along was not love conditioned by wealth, but loyalty, moral strength, and the ability to remain united in the face of adversity. That night, the Harringtons went to bed with a new feeling: they had gone through the fire of adversity and emerged more united, more courageous, and more loving than ever. James, observing his loved ones, knew that the experience, though cruel, had revealed the greatest wealth he could have imagined: a family sincere, faithful, and steadfast in love. And as the moon lit up their small apartment, James smiled inwardly, certain that this test would remain etched in their memory as a life lesson, a reminder that true worth is never measured in money, but in courage, loyalty, and true love.